my name's Nigel Milan. My privilege is to be the National Chief Executive of the Royal Flying Doctor Service. But to me, it's a bit like becoming Skippy's manager. You know, I mean, you're dealing with an absolute national icon, and I guess the couple of things that brought it home to me, and maybe if I put it in that context, is that if I tell you a couple of stories. I was only a couple of weeks into the job, and I was actually at the opening of Good Day USA, which is sort of a trade fair for the Aussies go to America and try and sell them lots of stuff. And the opening was actually in Melbourne, just to launch, you know, the fundraising for it. Reason I was there, we were going to be the charity at the main dinner on Australia Day in New York, and they were going to raise a bit of money for us. And I was standing next to this very handsome woman in a Cobra. And as you do when you're standing next to a handsome woman in a Cobra, you know, introduce yourself and, you know, and say, well, what do you do? Why are you here? And she said, oh, my name's Simone Tully, and I'm with OB Beef, organic beef. I'm a beef grower, and we're supplying the beef for the dinner. And she said, what do you do? And I said, oh, my name's Nigel Milan, and, you know, I'm with the Royal Flying Doctor. And she said, oh, you saved my son's life. There's a woman standing next to me. And then she told me the story that, you know, in 1966, a little boy, William, had a very bad accident. Now, kids having an accident it's always bad news, but they happen to live in a place called Aloo, which is in southwestern Queensland in the river country, and it's about 800 kilometres from anywhere you'd ever want to live. So it's you know, we're talking a very remote community. And what happened, they came back from mustering, the family, mustering the cattle. The little boy ran through the shed to greet them, tripped over some cabling to a gas bottle, and brought the gas bottle down on top of himself and cracked his skull open. So when they got to him, he's seeping brain fluid onto the floor. And as any parent would be, I mean, this is a tremendously traumatic experience. And so the first thing they do is ring the Royal Flying Doctor. And so from that very first moment through our telehealth service, they're getting instructions on the phone as how best to give him first aid. They commandeer a flat top truck and drive the kid to the nearest airfield, all the time on the satellite phone talking to one of our doctors. We've got a base at Charleville. Now that's even that was 200 odd kilometres away. And as luck would have it, they were also dealing in a possible dust storm. So the pilot had to make the decision about whether he was prepared to land an aircraft on a dirt strip with the potential of a dust storm. Now, obviously, it was the seriousness of the situation was explained to the pilot, and, you know, and our pilots are fairly ballsy, as you'd expect. And so they made the decision to, you know, to actually they'd fly over there. And fortunately, he got the aircraft on the ground. Dr. Bob Balmain was giving this kid, because he was in shock, manual respiratory resuscitation, and because his kidneys were going into failure, and he gave him that manual resuscitation for the 4 hours, both stabilising him on the ground, the entire flight, and the journey to the Royal Children's Hospital in Brisbane. And the story has a happy ending. The kid still has the odd seizure, but nonetheless it leads a more or less normal life. And so this was only a couple of weeks into the job, you know, and this woman was standing next to me. There are lots of stories like that. As soon as you travel anywhere in the outback, someone will tell you a story about how the Royal Flying Doctor has helped them. The other thing that I think is really unique about our service and why it has this status is not just the emergency rescue. That's what we're known for. When people think about the Flying Doctor because of all the TV series, it's invariably the swoop and scoop that they think about. But in fact, on the average day, there's something like 40 primary healthcare clinics going on around Australia where it's RGPs. So as the pattern of health delivery has changed, and it's getting harder and harder for people in rural and remote communities to get doctors to stay in that community, invariably we pick up the slack and we fly a doctor in. And I went on one of those clinic runs to a place called Tilpa. And the first thing you do is you're coming into land. You hear the pilot talking to Michael, can you drive that four-wheel drive down the runway and clear those roofs off? Would you stupid blokes take that bloody fence down? All you're doing is keeping them in. And so you see the four-wheel drive going literally a couple of minutes before you'll see as you're coming in, driving in front of the aircraft to actually clear the kangaroos from the strip. To, then you sort of bounce along a dirt strip. And then, of course, Michael's got his mate there, and they drive you in, and there was two of them with four-wheel drives because there was a doctor, there was actually a dentist on the aircraft that day, obviously myself and the pilot. And you go into the village, and then you meet Michael's wife, Jill McElhoney, and she's been baking cakes and making sandwiches for 2 days. And then you meet all of the patients. And this is where it really struck me, why that has this iconic status and why it's so important to those communities is if you go to the doctors here in London, invariably you're in a hurry. They're running late. You don't know. You may have met the receptionist before and she might remember your name, but it's unlikely. You don't know any of the other people in the room. You can't wait to get in and you can't wait to get out. And you're in a completely professional environment all the time. Well, of course, Michael and Jill, they're volunteers. The whole community are there because they're eating cakes and having tea. And so it's a social experience. And unlike in a metropolitan situation where everyone just runs, as soon as you had your appointment, you leave, everyone's still there nattering. And by the time the consultations of the day come to a close, everyone's still there to wave the doctor goodbye. So it's an essential part of the community. It's how people communicate. It creates a focal point for community life. And the church hall that we were in, or community hall we were in for the consultations, was actually like a shrine to the Royal Flying Doctor. There are bits of memorabilia, photographs, bits that have fallen off of aircraft over the years. And so you really sort of feel that you're with an organisation that's very, very special to the community and playing a role not just in physical health, but about mental health and how people feel about their community. Even a basic innovation now, in some ways, hasn't been that helpful, I think, to community life. When we talk about telemedicine, of course, it all used to be done on shortwave radio. And after they'd done the business of the day, and, the discussion about the medical problems, the line would stay open, and they had what they called the galah line. Now, those of you might know, a galah is a bright, colourful and very noisy Australian bird. And people used to have concerts, they'd chat, they'd run competitions, so it created a sense of community. Now we've switched to satellite phones, that doesn't happen. And we actually now and again get petitions for people saying, look, bring back the shortwave radio, because actually we miss the galah line. And I do worry with this move to very much home-focused care, which makes an enormous amount of sense. And of course it makes an enormous amount of sense in our situation because our folk are really remote, whether we don't actually isolate our patients and we actually, we actually lose, if you like, the pastoral care element of health. And I think that's going to be a very big challenge as we move into this new environment to actually maintain that human contact and that sort of hand and arm on the shoulder, even if it happens to be one over the wireless.